Marcus Webb stood in the center of the disciplinary chamber, surrounded by the 12 members of the Galactic Educational Consortium. The crystalline walls of the chamber pulsed with soft blue light, reflecting off the varied forms of the alien council members. Some had tentacles, others had multiple eyes, and a few existed as energy fields contained within specialized suits. The head council member, a towering insectoid creature named Zixthar, clicked his mandibles together in what Marcus had learned was a sign of extreme disapproval. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Human Marcus Webb, Zixthar began, his translator device rendering his chittering speech into perfect English. You have been summoned before this council to answer for your repeated violations of Academy protocol. Marcus kept his expression neutral. He had known this was coming. For the past 6 months at the prestigious Celestial Academy of Advanced Sciences, he had been pushing boundaries that the other species apparently held sacred. But he had his reasons. The Academy floated in orbit around the neutral planet of Concordia, a massive station that housed 20,000 students from across the galaxy. Humans were the newest members of the galactic community, and Marcus was part of the first generation of human students allowed to attend. It was supposed to be an honor, a privilege that billions of humans would never receive. The charges against you are extensive, continued a gel-like being whose name translated roughly to the one who flows. The creature's voice bubbled through its translation unit. You have contaminated 17 different laboratory environments with unknown biological agents. You have reprogrammed safety protocols in the engineering workshops. You have introduced unauthorized substances into the communal food preparation areas. Marcus resisted the urge to correct them. The biological agents were just Earth bacteria that his body naturally carried. The safety protocols he had adjusted were dangerously inadequate for anyone who actually worked with their hands. And the unauthorized substances were herbs and spices that made the bland academy food actually edible. You have also, Zixthar added, leaning forward with his compound eyes glittering, been conducting unauthorized classes in the lower deck recreation areas, teaching subjects not approved by the academic board. This was the real issue, Marcus knew. Everything else was just noise. The other charges they could have handled with warnings and decontamination procedures. But the teaching had threatened something deeper. Do you deny these charges? Asked a floating orb of light that represented the photonic species known as the Luminae. No, Marcus said simply. I don't deny any of it. A ripple of surprise moved through the council. In the 6 months since humans had joined the Academy, apparently none had ever simply admitted to rule violations. But Marcus saw no point in lying. He had done everything they accused him of, and he would do it again. Then you understand, Zixthar said, that we have no choice but to expel you from the Academy. You will be returned to Earth immediately. Your sponsorship will be revoked, and no other human will be permitted to take your place for a minimum of 10 standard cycles. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. 10 cycles meant 10 Earth years. He had not just destroyed his own opportunity, but had potentially closed the door for an entire generation of humans who might have followed him. However, the one who flows bubbled. Before we finalize this decision, we must understand one thing. Why did you do this? Your academic performance has been adequate. Your test scores place you in the middle percentile of all students. You could have completed your education without incident. Why risk everything for these violations? Marcus took a deep breath. He had been preparing for this question since the day he received the summons. Because adequate isn't survival, he said. And middle percentile means half of everyone here is worse prepared than me for the universe we actually live in. Zixthar's antennae twitched in confusion. Explain. Marcus gestured around the pristine chamber. This academy is beautiful. It's safe. It's controlled, but it's not real. Out there, in actual space, things go wrong. Equipment fails. Life support malfunctions. Food supplies run out. And when that happens, all the theoretical knowledge in the galaxy won't help you if you don't know how to actually survive. The Academy teaches survival protocols, objected a scaled reptilian council member. We have extensive courses on emergency procedures. You teach protocols for filing emergency reports, Marcus countered. You teach students to wait for rescue. But what if rescue doesn't come? What if you're stranded? What if the perfect, controlled environment suddenly becomes imperfect and uncontrolled? The council members exchanged glances, communicating in ways Marcus couldn't fully interpret. Some of them seemed offended, others confused, and a few appeared genuinely curious. The unauthorized classes you taught, the Lumine representative said, its light pulsing thoughtfully. What exactly were you teaching? Marcus had been waiting for this question too. Practical skills. How to purify water without a filtration system. How to identify edible versus toxic substances using simple chemical tests. How to create basic tools from raw materials. How to start a fire without power. How to treat injuries when medical equipment isn't available. How to navigate by stars when guidance systems fail. Primitive skills, Zixthar said dismissively. Unnecessary in a civilized galaxy. Tell that to the crew of the merchant vessel Prosperity, Marcus replied quietly. They were stranded in the Outer Rim for 3 weeks last year when their drive core failed. 5 crew members died waiting for rescue because they didn't know how to ration their supplies or recycle their water or keep warm when the heating failed. The chamber fell silent. The Prosperity incident had been news across the Academy. It was studied as an example of mechanical failure, but the focus had been on the engineering problems, not the survival failures. Or the research station on Kelvin 9, Marcus continued. 17 scientists frozen to death because when the automated systems failed, none of them knew how to generate heat manually. Or the colony ship Bright, Future that lost 40% of its population to food poisoning because no one knew how to properly preserve food without refrigeration when the power grid went down during a solar storm. Each example hit home. These were real incidents, recent ones, that had shocked the galactic community. But Marcus could see that none of the council members had connected them to a lack of basic survival knowledge. Your species is young, the one who flows said slowly. You have only just achieved interstellar travel. These skills you teach, they come from your primitive past. They come from a planet that tried to kill us every single day, Marcus said. Earth isn't like most homeworlds in the galactic community. We didn't evolve in easy environments. We came from a world with extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, toxic plants, and natural disasters. We survived because we learned to adapt, to improvise, to make do with whatever we had. Those aren't primitive skills. They're survival skills. And in a universe where things go wrong, they're the difference between life and death. Zixthar's mandibles clicked again, but this time the sound was different. Thoughtful rather than disapproving. The students you taught, he said. How many attended your unauthorized classes? Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to get anyone else in trouble, but he had promised himself he would be honest. It started with just a few, he admitted. Maybe 10 or 12. Students who had heard about Earth, who were curious. But word spread. By the end, I had over 300 students attending regularly, from dozens of different species. The council members exchanged more glances. 300 students represented more than 1% of the Academy's entire population. They came voluntarily? Asked the reptilian council member. Yes, I never forced anyone. I never even advertised. Students just kept showing up. The chamber fell silent again as the council processed this information. Marcus stood straight, waiting for their final judgment. He had said everything he could say. Now it was up to them. The vote to expel Marcus Webb passed with 8 votes in favor and 4 abstentions. No one voted against it. As the decision was announced, Marcus felt a strange mixture of disappointment and relief. He had known this outcome was likely, but he had hoped that perhaps, just perhaps, they might understand. He was given 48 hours to pack his belongings and prepare for transport back to Earth. The Academy's security protocols were strict, but not cruel. He would be allowed to say goodbye to friends. Though he suspected most students would avoid him now that he was officially marked as expelled, Marcus was wrong about that. When he returned to his quarters in the human wing of the dormitory complex, he found a crowd waiting outside his door. Dozens of students from at least 20 different species stood in the hallway. Some held small gifts, others simply wanted to shake his hand or touch his arm in whatever gesture of respect their species used. A young Vex Ari female, her feathers shimmering with distress colors, pushed to the front of the group. Her name was Krita, and she had been one of Marcus's first students. "Teacher Marcus," she chirped, her vocal cords producing sounds that her translator barely kept up with. "This is unjust. We will petition the council. We will demand they reconsider." Marcus smiled sadly and gestured for calm. "I appreciate that, Krita. I really do. But the council has made their decision, and honestly, they have every right to make it. I did break the rules." "Unjust rules," grumbled a massive Thorian, whose rocky skin made him look like a walking boulder. Murtaugh had been skeptical of Marcus's teachings at first, but after learning how to create basic tools from scrap metal, he had become one of the most enthusiastic students. Rules that value procedure over survival. Other voices joined in, creating a cacophony of agreement in multiple languages. Marcus raised his hands for silence. "Listen," he said, his voice carrying down the hallway. "I knew what I was doing when I started teaching you. I knew the risks, and I don't regret it. Every one of you learned something that might save your life someday. That's worth more to me than staying at this academy." The crowd grew quiet, though Marcus could see that many of them were not satisfied with this answer. They felt they had failed him somehow, that they should have protected their teacher. "Promise me something," Marcus continued. "Don't let what you learn disappear. Practice the skills. Teach others when you can. Maybe someday the Academy will understand that survival isn't about following protocols. It's about being prepared for when the protocols fail." The crowd slowly dispersed, though many students lingered to share personal goodbyes. As the hallway finally emptied, Marcus noticed one figure still waiting by his door. It was Telrin, a Lumine student whose light signature Marcus had learned to recognize even among others of his photonic species. "You do not seem surprised by the council's decision," Telrin observed. His light pulsing in a pattern Marcus had come to understand as curiosity. Marcus unlocked his door and gestured for Telrin to enter. The photonic being floated inside, casting soft shadows across the sparse quarters. "I'm not surprised," Marcus admitted, beginning to pack his few possessions into a storage container. "The Galactic community has been stable for so long that they've forgotten what instability looks like. They've built systems to prevent disasters, and those systems work most of the time. But they've lost the ability to cope when the systems fail. Your species has not lost this ability," Telrin stated. "It was not a question. Earth is only 3 generations removed from global conflict," Marcus explained. "My grandfather fought in wars where survival skills were the difference between life and death. My mother grew up in the aftermath, in a world still rebuilding. Humanity remembers chaos because we lived through it recently. We're not better than other species. We're just more recently traumatized." Telrin's light flickered in a pattern Marcus had never seen before. After a moment, the translator caught up. "Humor, You make a joke of trauma. It's how we cope, Marcus said with a slight smile. Another survival skill? They packed in silence for a while. Marcus didn't own much. A few changes of clothes, some personal items from Earth, his datapad containing notes from classes, and a small collection of basic tools he had fabricated in the workshops before the council shut down his access. I attended your final class 3 days ago, Telrin said suddenly. The one about creating fire from friction. My species does not experience temperature the way physical beings do. The lesson should have been meaningless to me. Marcus paused in his packing. But I understood something I had not understood before. The lesson was not truly about fire. It was about resourcefulness. About taking 2 pieces of ordinary material and transforming them through effort and knowledge into something powerful. This concept applies beyond physical survival. It applies to problem solving across all domains. Marcus smiled. That's exactly right. The specific skills are just examples. The real lesson is about mindset. About believing you can solve problems with whatever resources you have available. Telrin pulsed brightly. This is why 300 students came to your classes. Not because they wanted to learn primitive skills, but because you taught them to think differently about challenges. A soft chime interrupted their conversation. Marcus's datapad lit up with an incoming message marked as priority. He picked it up and read the contents, his expression shifting from neutral to confused. That's strange, he murmured. What is it? It's from the Academy's emergency response coordinator. She wants to meet with me before I leave. Says it's urgent, but not official. Telrin's light dimmed slightly, a sign of concern. Perhaps another charge against you? Marcus shook his head. If it were official, she would have just summoned me through proper channels. This is a personal request. He checked the timestamp. She wants to meet in 30 minutes at the observatory deck. Will you go? I don't see why not. I'm already expelled. What more can they do to me? The observatory deck was one of Marcus's favorite places in the entire academy. It was a massive transparent dome that offered an unobstructed view of the stars. Students often came here to study or simply to think while surrounded by the vastness of space. When Marcus arrived, he found Commander Shiera waiting alone by the central viewing platform. She was Izafari, a species known for their 4 arms and exceptional spatial reasoning abilities. She served as the Academy's Chief of Emergency Response, a position that mainly involved scheduling drills and maintaining evacuation protocols. Thank you for coming, human Marcus, she said, her secondary arms gesturing in a formal greeting, while her primary arms remained clasped behind her back. Commander, Marcus acknowledged with a nod. Your message said it was urgent. Shiera's eye stalks swiveled to check that they were alone before she spoke again. I wanted to speak with you before you departed. Off the record, as you humans say, Marcus waited, curious. I voted to abstain from your expulsion, she said quietly. Not because I approve of your rule violations, but because I was uncertain whether expulsion was the appropriate response. May I ask what made you uncertain? Shiera's eye stalks focused on him intently. 20 years ago, I was assigned to a research vessel exploring uncharted systems. We encountered a spatial anomaly that disabled our ship. We drifted for 16 days before rescue arrived. In that time, our food replicators failed, our water recycling system malfunctioned, and our environmental controls became erratic. 3 crew members died. I was the senior surviving officer. She paused, her voice dropping even lower. I have never spoken publicly about what happened during those 16 days. The official report states that we followed all proper emergency protocols and that the deaths were unavoidable equipment failures. But that is not the complete truth. Marcus remained silent, sensing that interrupting would be a mistake. The complete truth, Shiera continued, is that we followed protocols exactly as we had been trained. We filed emergency reports. We waited for rescue. We rationed our supplies according to the standard formulas. And 3 people died because our protocols assumed rescue would come within 72 hours. When it didn't, we had no additional skills to fall back on. She turned to face the stars beyond the dome. I have spent 20 years wondering if there was something more I could have done. Some knowledge I lacked that would have saved my crew. Your unauthorized classes offered exactly that knowledge. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Did you attend any of my sessions? No, Shiera admitted. My position made it impossible to do so without drawing attention. But I accessed the recordings that several students made. Against regulations, of course, but I needed to know what you were teaching. She pulled a small data chip from a pocket and handed it to Marcus. This contains my personal logs from those 16 days. Every mistake we made, every protocol that failed us, every moment where practical knowledge might have made a difference. I want you to have it. Marcus took the chip carefully. Why are you giving this to me? Commander Shiera's eye stalks focused intensely on Marcus as she explained. Because what you are teaching matters. Not just for students, but for everyone who travels in space. The galaxy has become comfortable, human Marcus. We have built magnificent technology, established safe trade routes, created emergency response systems. But we have forgotten that space itself is fundamentally hostile to life. We have forgotten how to be uncomfortable. Marcus turned the data chip over in his hands. It was a standard Academy format, nothing special about it physically. But the weight of what it contained made it feel heavier somehow. When you return to Earth, Shiera continued, what will you do with the knowledge you have tried to share? Marcus had been thinking about this question since the moment he received the summons to the disciplinary chamber. I'll keep teaching. Maybe not at a prestigious academy, but there are other ways to reach people. Humans are good at spreading information. We'll find a way. And the 300 students who attended your classes? What of them? I hope they'll remember what they learned. Maybe teach others. But I can't control that. I can only control what I do. Shiera's mandibles clicked in. What Marcus had learned was her species' equivalent of a smile. You underestimate the impact you have had, I think. But you will see. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, his datapad chimed again. This time, it was an official Academy notification. A transport ship that would take him back to Earth had arrived ahead of schedule. He was expected at the departure bay within the hour. I should go, Marcus said. Thank you for this, Commander, and for what you shared with me. Safe travels, human Marcus. Perhaps we will meet again under better circumstances. Marcus made his way back to his quarters to collect his belongings. The hallways seemed quieter than usual, though he occasionally passed students who nodded in recognition or offered small gestures of farewell. Word had spread quickly about his impending departure. When he reached his room, he found one final surprise waiting. Sitting outside his door was a simple wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. Marcus picked up the box carefully and carried it inside. When he opened it, he found it filled with small objects. A fire-starting kit made from scrap metal, crafted with obvious care. A hand-drawn star chart on actual paper, something almost no one used anymore. A water filtration device built from Academy laboratory equipment. A first aid kit containing both modern medical supplies and improvised alternatives. Dozens of items, each one representing a skill he had taught. At the bottom of the box, he found a datapad with a single video file queued up. He pressed play. The video showed a large gathering in one of the Academy's recreation rooms. Marcus recognized it as the space where he had held his final class. But now it was filled with students, hundreds of them, far more than had ever attended a single session. They were arranged in organized groups, each group wearing colored bands to identify themselves. Krita stepped forward in the video, her feathers displaying proud colors. "Teacher Marcus," she said, addressing the camera directly. "By the time you see this, you will have been expelled from the academy. We could not stop this injustice, but we can ensure that your teachings continue." The camera panned across the room, showing each group in turn. "We have organized ourselves into teaching circles," Krita continued. "Each circle focuses on one of the skills you taught us. The fire-starting circle, the water purification circle, the navigation circle, the tool-making circle. We have created schedules, designated instructors, and established practice sessions." A Thorian student Marcus recognized as Corvex stepped into view. "We have also begun documenting everything, every technique, every principle, every lesson you shared. We are creating a comprehensive survival manual that will be distributed across the Academy network and beyond." The camera shifted to show Telrin, his light pulsing with determination. "Your expulsion was meant to silence these teachings. Instead, it has amplified them. You taught us to adapt and overcome. We are applying that lesson now." More students stepped forward, each adding their voice. A young Zathare explained how they were incorporating survival skills into their engineering studies. A Vexare described plans to bring the techniques to their home colony. A crystalline being from a species Marcus barely knew spoke about the philosophical implications of self-reliance. The video ended with all the students together, hundreds of diverse beings united in purpose. "Thank you, Teacher Marcus," they said in dozens of languages, the translations overlapping into a chorus of gratitude. "Your lessons will survive, even if you cannot stay here to teach them." Marcus had to sit down. He replayed the video twice more, noting details he had missed the first time. The organization they had created was impressive. The dedication was clear. These students had taken his informal classes and transformed them into something systematic and enduring. His datapad chimed with a 15-minute warning for his transport. Marcus carefully packed the wooden box with his other belongings and made his way to the departure bay. The bay was a massive space designed to accommodate ships of various sizes and configurations. Marcus's transport was a small, efficient vessel designed for system-to-system travel. It would take him to the nearest human-controlled station, where he would transfer to a ship bound for Earth. As he walked across the bay toward the boarding ramp, Marcus noticed something unusual. Students lined the walkway on both sides, creating a corridor of witnesses to his departure. They stood silently, not protesting or making a scene, simply present. Marcus walked slowly between them, making eye contact with as many as he could. Some held small objects, the tools and devices they had learned to make. Others simply raised their hands in farewell gestures, appropriate to their species. At the base of the boarding ramp, Krita waited with a small delegation of students who had been his teaching assistants. She held a datapad and approached Marcus with formal dignity. "Teacher Marcus," she said, her voice carrying across the bay. "On behalf of the 347 students who attended your classes, I present you with this." She handed him the datapad. Marcus looked at the screen and saw a document titled The Web Survival Codex, a comprehensive guide to practical emergency preparedness. The author list included dozens of names, with his own listed first. "We have submitted this to the Academy's academic archive," Krita explained. "It is now part of the official educational record. Future students will have access to these teachings, regardless of whether you are here to present them." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you," he managed to say. "All of you. This is more than I ever expected." "You taught us to expect more from ourselves," Krita replied. "We are simply following your example." A voice echoed across the bay, announcing the final boarding call for Marcus's transport. He took one last look at the assembled students, trying to memorize this moment. Then he turned and walked up the ramp into the ship. The interior of the transport was utilitarian and efficient. Marcus found his assigned seat in the small passenger cabin and strapped in. Through the viewport, he could still see the students in the departure bay, many of them waving or displaying their species. Equivalent gestures as the ship's engines powered up and the bay doors began to open to reveal the stars beyond. Marcus pulled out the data chip Commander Shiera had given him. He loaded it into his personal pad and began reading her logs from those 16 terrible days stranded in space. The details were haunting. The slow realization that rescue wasn't coming quickly. The careful rationing that somehow wasn't careful enough. The moment when they realized their water recycling system had failed and they had no backup plan. The deaths that came not from violence or sudden disaster, but from the slow accumulation of small failures in the face of an environment that didn't care about their protocols. But what struck Marcus most was Shiera's self-awareness throughout the logs. She knew, even in the moment, that there should have been other options. She knew that simply following procedures wasn't enough. She just didn't know what else to do. The transport ship cleared the Academy's gravity field and jumped faster than light travel. Through the viewport, the stars stretched into familiar lines of light as space compressed around them. Marcus had seen this effect dozens of times, but it never failed to inspire a sense of wonder. He thought about the past 6 months at the Academy. The initial excitement of being among so many different species, all pursuing knowledge together. The gradual realization that something was missing from the curriculum. The decision to start teaching on his own, knowing it was against regulations, but feeling it was necessary. The growing group of students who had attended his classes. And now, the expulsion that had somehow transformed into something larger. Marcus opened the survival codex that the students had created. It was comprehensive and well organized, far better than anything he could have produced alone. They had taken his informal lessons and structured them into clear categories with detailed explanations and illustrations adapted for different species physiology. There were sections on basic fire-starting techniques, modified for species that experienced temperature differently, water purification methods that accounted for varied bio. The journey back to human space took 4 days, with 2 transfers to different ships. Marcus spent most of that time studying Commander Shiera's logs and reviewing the survival codex his students had created. Each reading revealed new details, new considerations he hadn't thought about. The students had genuinely improved on his teachings, adapting them in ways that only a diverse group of species could accomplish. When Marcus finally arrived at Armstrong Station, Earth's primary orbital facility, he was surprised to find a welcoming committee waiting. Not an official one, but a group of humans who had apparently been monitoring news from the Galactic Academy. A woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair stepped forward. She wore a simple jumpsuit with the logo of the Terran Educational Institute, one of Earth's premier learning centers. "Marcus Webb?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, Dean of Practical Sciences at TEI. We've been following your situation at the Academy with great interest." Marcus shook her hand, confused. "I'm not sure what you've heard, but I was expelled for violating Academy regulations." Dr. Chun smiled. "Oh, we know. We've read the official reports. We've also read the survival codex your students published, and we've reviewed approximately 40 hours of recordings from your unauthorized classes. Recordings that have been spreading rapidly through human educational networks." She gestured to the group behind her. "These are representatives from various institutions across Earth and our colonies. We've been waiting to speak with you about bringing your teaching approach to human schools." Marcus blinked, trying to process this. "You want me to teach survival skills? We already have programs for that on Earth. We have wilderness survival programs Dr. Chun corrected. "We have military training. We have emergency response courses. What we don't have is a comprehensive approach to space-age survival that integrates practical skills with advanced technology awareness. Your students at the Academy learn not just how to start a fire, but how to think about resource allocation when systems fail. That's what we want to develop." Another representative stepped forward, a younger man with the insignia of the Mars Colonial Authority. "The colonies are particularly interested. We're still establishing infrastructure on Mars, Europa, and Titan. We operate in environments that are fundamentally hostile to human life. Your approach to teaching adaptability and resourcefulness could save lives." Over the next several hours, Marcus met with representatives from a dozen different organizations. They asked questions about his teaching methods, his curriculum development, his philosophy on balancing technology with practical skills. Many of them had reviewed the codex his students created and wanted to adapt it for human use. By the time the meetings concluded, Marcus had received 5 formal job offers, 3 consulting proposals, and an invitation to speak at the Global Education Summit in Geneva the following month. It was overwhelming and exciting and completely unexpected. Dr. Chun walked with him to his connecting transport, the one that would take him down to Earth's surface. "You seem surprised by all this attention," she observed. "I thought I had failed," Marcus admitted. "I was expelled from the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. I cost humanity a seat at that institution for the next decade." "You didn't fail," Dr. Chun said firmly. "You identified a critical gap in galactic education, and you addressed it, even knowing the personal cost. That's not failure. That's leadership." She handed him a data tablet. "This contains preliminary course outlines we've developed based on your teaching approach. We'd like you to review them and provide feedback. If you decide to work with us, we can begin implementation within 3 months." Marcus took the tablet, feeling the weight of possibility. "Can I ask you something? Why is this such a priority for you?" Dr. Chun's expression grew serious. "Because humanity is still new to the galactic community, and we're vulnerable in ways that older species aren't. We don't have thousands of years of established infrastructure. We don't have the deep support networks that come with being integrated into galactic civilization for millennia. If something goes wrong, if systems fail, if we find ourselves stranded or isolated, we need to be able to survive on our own capabilities." She paused, looking out at Earth through the station's viewport. "Your students at the Academy learned something that the galactic community has forgotten. They learned that safety isn't just about having good systems. It's about being prepared for when those systems fail. Humanity can't afford to forget that lesson." Marcus returned to Earth and spent the next week in his family's home in Montana, a rural area surrounded by mountains and forests. His parents were proud of him, though they didn't fully understand what had happened at the Academy. They were simple people, ranchers who lived close to the land and had taught Marcus most of his practical skills during his childhood. His father, a weathered man in his 60s, sat with Marcus on the porch one evening as the sun set behind the mountains. "So these aliens," he said in his slow, thoughtful way, "they kicked you out for teaching kids how to survive?" "Basically, yes," Marcus confirmed. His father chuckled. "Seems to me they've been living too easy for too long. Forgotten what it's like when nature doesn't care about your plans. That's pretty much what I told them." "And now people here want you to teach the same things?" Marcus nodded. "They want to develop programs based on what I was doing at the Academy. Integrate survival skills with space exploration training." His father was quiet for a long moment, watching the sky darken and the stars begin to appear. "Your grandfather," he said finally, "survived 3 years in a prisoner of war camp during the last war. You know how he made it when others didn't?" Marcus had heard some stories, but he shook his head, wanting to hear his father's version. He knew how to make something from nothing, how to find water in unlikely places, how to stay warm without fire, how to keep his mind sharp when everything around him was breaking down. Those weren't things he learned in the military. Those were things he learned growing up poor during the Depression, when survival was just part of daily life. His father turned to look at Marcus directly. People forget that safety is temporary. Comfort is temporary. The universe doesn't owe us anything. It's good that you're teaching people to remember that. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself standing in front of 200 instructors at the Terran Educational Institute's main campus in California. He had agreed to lead an intensive workshop on developing survival-focused curricula for space-age education. The participants came from schools, military academies, colonial training programs, and even corporate space exploration companies. He started his presentation with a simple question. How many of you have been in a situation where technology failed and you had to rely on practical skills to survive? About a third of the hands went up. Marcus nodded. How many of you teach your students what to do in those situations? Most of the hands went down. That's the gap we're here to address, Marcus continued. Not because technology is bad or unreliable, but because the universe is big and unpredictable and sometimes hostile. Our students need to be prepared for both the expected and the unexpected. He spent the next 3 hours walking through the principles he had developed during his time at the academy. Not just specific techniques, but frameworks for thinking about survival. How to assess resources. How to prioritize needs. How to adapt solutions to changing circumstances. How to maintain hope and purpose when systems fail. The instructors engaged deeply with the material, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. Many of them had been in situations where standard protocols hadn't been enough, where improvisation had made the difference. They understood intuitively what Marcus was teaching because they had lived it. During a break, a woman approached Marcus. She introduced herself as Captain Elena Vasquez, a transport pilot who had spent 15 years running supplies to the outer colonies. I was stranded once, she told him quietly. 3 days in a damaged ship waiting for rescue. My life support was failing, my communications were down, and I had limited supplies. I survived because my grandmother had taught me some old techniques for conserving water and managing body temperature. Things that had nothing to do with my pilot training. She paused, her eyes distant with the memory. When I was rescued, I filed a report about what happened. I included recommendations that all pilots receive basic survival training beyond standard emergency protocols. The report was acknowledged and filed away. Nothing changed. What made you come to this workshop? Marcus asked. Because someone finally listened, Vasquez said simply. You went to an alien academy and taught survival skills, knowing it would get you expelled. That took courage. And it worked. Your students learned. They're spreading that knowledge. Maybe now, finally, we'll make those changes I recommended 15 years ago. The workshop concluded with the participants committing to develop pilot programs for their institutions. Marcus volunteered to consult with each group, helping them adapt the survival codex his academy students had created for human-specific needs. Month after his return to Earth, Marcus received an unexpected communication from the Galactic Academy. It was marked as official, which made him wary, but the sender was listed as the Office of the Academic Council. Marcus opened the communication with caution. The message began with formal pleasantries, then got to the point. The Academy was requesting his presence for a special hearing. It was not another disciplinary matter, the message assured him, but rather a review of new developments that had occurred since his departure. He almost deleted the message. He had moved on, found meaningful work on Earth, and had no desire to revisit the institution that had expelled him. But something in the wording caught his attention. The message mentioned that Commander Shiera had specifically requested his attendance. 3 days later, Marcus found himself back aboard the Academy station. walking through the same corridors he had left 2 months earlier. But this time, the atmosphere felt different. Students he passed didn't just nod in recognition. They stopped him, thanked him, showed him the tools they had made or the techniques they had practiced. A young Thorian approached with a group of friends. "Teacher Marcus, we completed the advanced water purification module last week. We built a filtration system that works in zero gravity without power." Marcus smiled. "That's excellent work. Did you document the process?" "Of course," the student replied proudly. "Everything is being added to the codex. We're up to version 3.2 now." As Marcus made his way to the council chambers, he passed the recreation room where he had held his classes. Through the doorway, he could see it was occupied by a large group engaged in what looked like a practical demonstration. Someone was teaching fire starting techniques to an attentive audience. The council chamber looked the same as it had during his expulsion hearing. The same 12 council members sat in their designated positions, though their expressions seemed less hostile than before. Zixthar called the session to order with his characteristic mandible clicking. "Human Marcus Webb," he began, "thank you for returning to the Academy. We understand this may be uncomfortable given the circumstances of your previous departure." Marcus stood in the center of the chamber, just as he had 2 months earlier. "I'm here because Commander Shiera requested it." "What is this about?" The one who flows bubbled forward. "Since your expulsion, there have been significant developments. Developments that have forced the Council to reconsider certain aspects of our educational philosophy. A holographic display activated, showing statistical data." Marcus recognized it as Academy Incident Reports. The display highlighted 3 separate emergencies that had occurred in the 2 months since his departure. The first incident, Zixthar explained, involved a research team stranded on an ice moon when their shuttle's heating system failed. They survived for 5 days in temperatures that should have killed them within hours. When asked how they managed, they credited techniques learned from your unauthorized classes. The display shifted to show the second incident. A cargo transport experienced catastrophic life support failure. The crew of 8 had to survive for 3 days breathing recycled air they manually filtered using improvised equipment. Again, they credited knowledge gained from your survival codex. The third incident appeared on screen. Most significantly, a colony ship carrying 2,000 settlers encountered a cascade systems failure. Multiple critical systems went offline simultaneously. The crisis should have resulted in hundreds of casualties. Instead, there were 0 deaths and only minor injuries. The settlers organized themselves using principles documented in your teachings. They created backup systems, rationed resources, and maintained order until repairs could be completed. Marcus listened, his mind racing. He had hoped his teachings would help someone someday, but he hadn't expected such immediate and dramatic results. Commander Shiera stepped forward, her eye stalks focused intently on Marcus. "After these incidents, I brought a proposal to the Council. I argued that the Academy's curriculum has a dangerous gap. We teach theory and protocol extensively, but we neglect practical survival skills. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. The Council has spent the past month reviewing this proposal," Zixthar said. "We have also reviewed the comprehensive documentation your students created. The Survival Codex has now been accessed over 50,000 times across the Galactic network. Institutions throughout the Galactic community have begun developing their own survival training programs based on these materials." The Luminae representative's light pulsed thoughtfully. "We have come to a difficult conclusion. Your expulsion was legally correct. You did violate Academy regulations. However, those regulations were inadequate. You identified a critical deficiency in our educational approach, and you addressed it despite knowing the personal consequences. We cannot reverse your expulsion," the one who flows stated. "That decision was made according to proper procedures and must stand. However, we can acknowledge that the regulations you violated should not have existed in the first place. Marcus felt a strange mixture of vindication and frustration. They were admitting he had been right, but the punishment remained. Zixthar's mandibles clicked in. What Marcus had learned was a sign of discomfort. The council has voted to establish a new department within the academy, the Department of Practical Survival Sciences. This department will integrate hands-on survival training with traditional academic subjects. It will be a formal part of the curriculum, required for all students. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light. We would like you to lead this department as its founding director. Marcus stared at the council members, certain he had misheard. You want me to come back? After expelling me? Not as a student, Commander Shiera clarified. As faculty. A full professor with academic freedom to develop curriculum as you see fit. Your students would no longer be unauthorized. Your classes would be official. This is unprecedented, admitted the reptilian council member. We have never appointed someone who was previously expelled. But the evidence is clear. Your approach to education addresses a need we did not recognize. The council voted 8-4 in favor of this appointment. Marcus walked slowly around the chamber, processing this offer. 2 months ago, these same beings had expelled him for the very activities they now wanted to formalize. It felt surreal. Why now? He asked. What changed between my expulsion and today? People lived instead of died, Shiera said bluntly. 3 separate incidents, 3 different scenarios, all resolved successfully because of skills you taught. That is not coincidence. That is evidence. And the students who attended my unauthorized classes. Telren's voice came from the viewing gallery above. Marcus looked up to see the photonic being observing the proceedings. They have transformed the academy culture. Practical skills are no longer dismissed as primitive. They are sought after, valued, shared. You changed how an entire generation thinks about preparation and resilience. Zixthar stepped down from his elevated position, something Marcus had never seen a council member do during a formal session. The insectoid being approached Marcus directly, a gesture of respect among his species. I voted to expel you, Zixthar said quietly. I believed you were a disruptive influence who did not respect our institutions. I was wrong. You respected something more important than institutions. You respected life and the skills needed to preserve it. I have learned from this error. He extended one of his multiple limbs in what Marcus recognized as an offer to clasp hands. The human gesture Zixthar had clearly studied. Will you accept this position? Zixthar asked. Will you help us build something better than what we had? Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. His childhood in Montana, learning practical skills from parents who valued self-reliance. His decision to attend the Galactic Academy, hoping to bridge human knowledge with alien wisdom. His unauthorized classes, taught in recreation rooms to students who craved something their formal education wasn't providing. His expulsion, which had felt like failure, but had catalyzed change across multiple worlds. He thought about Commander Shiera's logs, the deaths that might have been prevented with better training. He thought about the cargo ship crew, and the stranded researchers, and the colony ship settlers, all of whom had survived because they knew how to adapt when systems failed. He thought about his students, the 300 who had attended his classes, and the thousands more who had accessed the codex they created. They had proven that knowledge could spread, that culture could shift, that institutions could change when evidence demanded it. Marcus reached out and clasped Zixthar's extended limb. I accept, he said, but I have conditions. Name them. The one who flows bubbled. First, the students who created the Survival Codex receive full academic credit for their work. They deserve recognition for transforming informal lessons into systematic documentation. Agreed, Zixthar said immediately. Second, This department must be truly interdisciplinary. I want to work with engineers, biologists, physicists, philosophers. Survival isn't just about physical skills. It's about psychology, ethics, decision-making under pressure. We need expertise from across the academy. That is the intent, the Luminae representative confirmed. We have already identified faculty from 8 different departments who wish to contribute. Third, and this is non-negotiable, Marcus said firmly, the department must include faculty and students from as many SPA.